The evening lights of Port Holloway flickered on one by one as the cold wind moved through the spaceport streets. Ships of many shapes rested on metal platforms, their engines quiet after long journeys across the stars. Traders, pilots, workers, and travelers passed through the wide paths, each busy with their own lives. Among the tall buildings and glowing signs, there was a small soup stall made from old metal sheets and recycled panels. It was not fancy, but it was warm. Elias stood behind the counter, stirring a large pot of soup. Steam rose into the air, carrying a simple smell of vegetables, herbs, and slow-cooked broth. He wore a thick jacket and fingerless gloves, his hands red from the cold. The stall was his entire world. He opened it every evening and closed it late at night. Some days he earned enough to rest easy. Some days he barely earned anything at all. Still, he showed up every night. Elias had learned long ago that Port Holloway did not care about dreams. It cared about survival. People who waited for luck usually went hungry, so he worked. He cooked. He smiled at customers even when his back hurt and his legs felt heavy. Soup was cheap, warm, and filling. That was enough for most people here. The crowd thinned as the night grew colder. Elias wiped the counter and checked the pot. There was not much soup left, but he planned to sell it all before closing. As he looked up, he noticed someone standing a short distance away, just under a broken light panel. She did not move like the others. She was tall, with pale blue skin that softly reflected the lights around her. Her hair, long and silver, flowed down her back like thin metal threads. Her clothes were strange, well-made but simple, designed for function rather than style. She stood very still, watching the stall as if unsure whether to come closer. Elias frowned slightly. Port Holloway saw many aliens, but this one looked different. Not lost exactly, but careful. Cold seemed to affect her more than it did humans. Her arms were held close to her body, and her breathing looked slow and controlled, as if warmth was something she had to fight for. After a moment, she took a small step forward, then another. Finally, she stood in front of the stall. Elias smiled, the same polite smile he gave everyone. "Evening," he said. "Soup's hot." She looked at him, her eyes a deep violet color, shining with quiet focus. When she spoke, her voice was soft and careful, as if each word had been chosen with effort. "I do not understand the exchange system here," she said. "Is warmth restricted to purchase only?" Elias blinked. He had heard many strange questions in his life, but this one caught him off guard. "Well," he said slowly, "normally, yeah, but it's just soup." She looked confused. "Just soup?" He picked up a bowl and filled it with steaming broth. Vegetables floated gently on the surface. He placed it on the counter and slid it toward her. "You look cold," he said. "Have some." She stared at the bowl, then at him. "I do not have the correct local credits." "That's okay," Elias replied. "I'm not checking." She hesitated, her long fingers hovering near the bowl. Then she slowly wrapped her hands around it. The heat touched her skin, and her shoulders relaxed almost instantly. A quiet breath escaped her lips. Her eyes closed for a brief moment. "This temperature," she said softly, "is stabilizing." Elias chuckled lightly. "Yeah, that's what hot soup does." She took a careful sip. Her eyes widened slightly. She drank again, more confidently this time. Color seemed to deepen in her skin, becoming warmer, more alive. Whatever biology she had, the soup was clearly helping. She finished half the bowl before she spoke again. "Why would you give this to me?" she asked. "Without certainty of return?" Elias shrugged. "You needed it." She looked at him for a long time, as if trying to understand something much larger than soup. Finally, she nodded once. "Thank you," she said. "You're welcome." She finished the bowl slowly, then placed it back on the counter with care. "I will remember this," she said. Elias smiled. "You don't have to." She stepped away from the stall, blending back into the moving lights and shadows of the port. Elias watched her go for a moment, then turned back to his pot. He did not think much of it. People came and went every day. Kindness, he believed, should not be heavy. It should be easy. That night, Elias closed the stall with an empty pot and tired hands. He walked home through narrow streets, thinking only about sleep and tomorrow's ingredients. Far above Port Holloway, a sleek private ship waited in silent orbit. Inside, the alien woman sat alone in a quiet chamber, the warmth from the soup still lingering in her body. Her name was Sarai. She accessed her ship's systems with a simple gesture. Data streams filled the air around her, economic reports, trade flows, human colony statistics. She was not a traveler by chance. She was an observer, a planner, a figure of enormous influence across multiple star systems. Her personal net worth exceeded the annual economy of entire planets. Yet none of that mattered in that moment. She replayed the memory of the soup stall, the human's calm voice, his lack of curiosity about her status, his complete absence of fear or desire for advantage. On her world, nothing was free. Kindness always came with conditions. Resources were shared only through balance sheets and contracts. What Elias had done broke every model she understood. He did not ask, she said quietly to the empty room. He did not calculate. Her ship's intelligence responded. The action appears statistically irrational. Sarai's lips curved slightly, or deeply rational in a way we have failed to measure. She opened a file and tagged it with a single word: humanity. Outside, Port Holloway continued its usual rhythm, unaware that something subtle had shifted. One bowl of soup, given without thought, had entered the balance of the galaxy. And nothing, from that point forward, would remain quite the same. Morning came slowly to Port Holloway. The artificial sun panels above the colony brightened in stages, casting soft light over metal streets and stacked buildings. Elias woke to the sound of cargo engines and distant announcements from the spaceport. He lay still for a moment, staring at the ceiling of his small room. It was plain, clean, and quiet. Not much space, but enough. He dressed, washed his face with cold water, and checked his supplies list. Vegetables were running low. He would need to visit the market before opening the stall that evening. Nothing about the morning felt unusual. The memory of the strange alien woman barely crossed his mind. To Elias, she was just another traveler who needed warmth. Across the colony, systems were already adjusting. Trade terminals recalculated fees without announcing why. Shipping schedules shifted by minutes, then hours, then entire days. Small changes at first, invisible to most people. Only the central economic networks noticed something new entering their calculations. Something powerful and quiet. Sarai sat in her ship's observation chamber, watching the colony through layered screens. The ship hovered far enough away to avoid attention, its signature masked. She had not slept. Her species did not require rest in the same way humans did, especially when their minds were active. Data flowed around her. Human migration patterns, labor exchanges, debt structures, emergency aid reports. She compared charts from different colonies, looking for patterns she had seen many times before, and then she isolated Port Holloway. It was not a wealthy place. It survived on thin margins, dependent on shipping lanes and passing traders. Most small vendors barely broke even. One failed contract could ruin an entire block. She zoomed in further. Elias Marrow, age 32. No criminal record, no corporate ties, no property beyond a rented room and a food license. Financial history marked by consistency, not growth. He gave free meals 3 times in the last standard year, all recorded only because the recipients later mentioned it in unrelated reports. He does this without recognition, Sarai said quietly. The ship intelligence responded, correct. There is no social or economic gain detected. Then why? She asked. The system paused. Human behavior often prioritizes short-term emotional logic over long-term material advantage. Sarai considered that. Or perhaps humans understand value differently. She expanded the view. Dozens of similar stories appeared, humans sharing heat, food, tools, time. Small acts, constant acts, individually meaningless, together, powerful. On her world, such behavior would be labeled inefficient. On human worlds, it seemed to be survival. That evening, Elias returned to his stall as usual. The market had been busy, but something felt different. Prices were slightly lower. Suppliers smiled more. One even gave him extra vegetables, by mistake. Elias accepted them with thanks, assuming it was luck. As he set up the stall, he noticed more people passing through the port than normal. Independent traders, small crews, families. Business felt good. The soup sold faster than usual. Then he saw her again. Sarai stood at the edge of the crowd, watching him. This time, she wore a thicker outer layer, adjusted to local climate standards. She moved with more confidence now, her posture relaxed. Elias smiled when he recognized her. Hey, you're back. Yes, she said. I wish to speak with you. He handed a bowl to another customer and turned back to her. Soup? She nodded. I have learned how to exchange credits. Good for you, he said lightly. But you don't have to. I would like to, she replied. He accepted the payment, noticing that the credit chip was old but high grade, not common. Still, he did not comment. He gave her a bowl and leaned against the counter as she ate. This place, she said, gesturing around them, is harsh. Depends on the day, Elias replied. Cold days feel harsher. Yet you remain, she said. Someone's gotta, he said. People get hungry. She looked at him again with that careful focus. On my world, food distribution is automated. No individual chooses who eats. And how does that work out? Elias asked. No one starves, she said. That's good, he replied. But does anyone choose to help? Sarai paused. Help is unnecessary. Elias shrugged. Maybe that's the difference. Around them, the spaceport buzzed. A trader nearby argued happily with a mechanic. A child laughed as steam from the soup fogged the air. Sarai watched it all. Your species accepts suffering as a shared burden, she said, not an individual failure. Most of us do, Elias replied. Some don't. We try anyway. She finished the soup. If I were to change this place, she asked carefully, would you approve? Elias laughed. If you can make rent cheaper and winters warmer, sure. She smiled faintly. I will consider that. That night, more changes settled into Port Holloway, contracts rewritten in quiet databases. Interest rates adjusted downward. Shipping monopolies loosened their grip, not through force, but through opportunity elsewhere. Within days, dock workers noticed shorter shifts and better pay. Vendors noticed fewer surprise fees. Nobody knew why. They only knew life felt slightly less heavy. Elias noticed too, though he did not connect it to Sarai. He just felt relieved, less tired, hopeful in a way he had not been for years. From orbit, Sarai watched the effects unfold. Her wealth moved like gravity, invisible but undeniable. Yet she felt no pride, only curiosity. These changes are minor, the ship intelligence said. You could do far more. Yes, Sarai replied. But humans distrust sudden miracles. She observed Elias through a distant lens as he laughed with a customer, handing a child a smaller bowl at no charge. "He changes his world one person at a time," she said. "I will do the same." She opened a new project file, not labeled with profit projections, not marked for expansion speed. It had a simple note: learn from humans. Below Port Holloway, the colony settled into sleep, unaware that a quiet alliance had begun, between a man who gave soup without thought and a woman who controlled fortunes but was only now learning what they were truly for. The galaxy had measured humans by their wars, their inventions, their hunger for expansion. It had not measured their kindness. And that oversight was about to become very important. Days passed, and Port Holloway felt different in ways people could not easily explain. The streets were still narrow, the buildings were still old, the wind was still cold, but something in the air had softened. Conversations lasted longer. Smiles appeared more often. Small arguments ended faster. It was as if the colony had taken a quiet breath. Elias noticed it most in the evenings. His soup stall no longer stood alone in silence during slow hours. People gathered nearby even when they were not hungry. Some talked while holding warm bowls. Others simply stood close to the heat, listening. Elias did not mind. He liked the company. It reminded him that he was part of something larger than his small stall. Business was steady, better than it had ever been. He was able to save a little. Not much, but enough to stop worrying about the next rent cycle. That alone felt like a gift. Sarai continued to visit every few nights. She never announced herself. She simply arrived, paid for soup, and spoke with Elias while the crowd moved around them. She asked questions, many questions. About food, about work, about why humans joked when they were tired, and why they helped even when it hurt them. Elias answered as best he could. Sometimes he laughed. Sometimes he thought carefully before speaking. One night she asked, "If humans know life is unfair, why do they continue to care?" Elias stirred the pot slowly before replying. "Because if we don't, it gets worse. For everyone." Sarai thought about that long after she returned to her ship. From orbit, her influence continued to spread, still gentle, still unseen. She did not force change. She created options. New trade paths opened that favored small operators. Contracts were rewritten with clearer terms. Systems that punished failure too harshly were adjusted to allow recovery. The results surprised even her. Human communities responded quickly. When pressure eased, they shared the relief. Workers helped each other find better positions. Vendors lowered prices slightly instead of raising them. Cooperation increased without instruction. The ship intelligence presented reports. Productivity has increased despite reduced competitive pressure. Sarai nodded. They do not thrive under constant fear. Another file appeared. A coalition of corporate interests had noticed the changes. Large entities did not like unexplained shifts. They preferred control, predictability. "They will investigate," the intelligence said. "I expect they will," Sarai replied calmly. Back on the ground, Elias experienced the effects in a more personal way. One evening, a man in a clean coat stopped by the stall. He did not order soup. He watched quietly as Elias served others. When the crowd thinned, the man stepped closer. "You run this place alone?" he asked. "Most nights," Elias said. "You should consider expansion," the man said. "There is interest." Elias raised an eyebrow. "Interest from who?" "People who see potential," the man replied carefully. "I sell soup, not dreams." The man chuckled, but his eyes stayed sharp. Sometimes they are the same. After he left, Elias felt uneasy. He had lived long enough to recognize opportunity wearing expensive shoes. He did not want it. Not like that. That night, Sarai arrived later than usual. You were approached, she said. Elias looked at her. You have good ears. I have access, she corrected. They are watching you. Why? He asked. I didn't do anything. Sarai's expression softened. That is exactly why, she explained, carefully, without names or numbers. Large groups had noticed changes across the sector. They wanted to find the source. Humans like Elias, who stood at the center of small but meaningful shifts, attracted attention. Elias sighed. I don't want trouble. You will not receive it, Sarai said. Not if I can help it. He looked at her. Why are you really doing all this? She was silent for a moment. Then she said, because your species does something rare. You improve systems by improving people. Elias shook his head slightly. I just cook soup. Sarai smiled. Exactly. As weeks passed, Port Holloway became a model others quietly copied, not officially. Officially, nothing had changed. But traders talked. Workers shared stories. Other colonies began asking why conditions were better there. Sarai expanded her efforts, still slow, still careful. She did not want to be seen as a ruler or a savior. She wanted to be invisible. But invisibility never lasts forever. One evening, a public announcement echoed through the port. A representative from the Interstellar Commerce Council had arrived. Meetings were scheduled. Audits announced. Fear crept back into the colony like a cold draft. Elias saw it in people's eyes as they came for soup. They spoke in quieter voices. They looked over their shoulders. Sarai arrived earlier than usual that night. They are here, she said. I figured, Elias replied. People don't smile like that when they're happy. They suspect external influence, Sarai said. They will look for disruption. Elias leaned on the counter. And what happens if they find you? They will not, she said. I am prepared. And if they decide the problem is us? He asked. Sarai met his gaze. Then they will learn something about humans. She did not explain further. The next day, inspections began. Stalls were checked, licenses reviewed, vendors questioned. Elias answered honestly. He had nothing to hide. Still, the process was exhausting. At night, Sarai worked quietly, redirecting pressure, smoothing paths, turning sharp edges into soft ones. She did not fight the council. She overwhelmed them with compliance, clarity, and better alternatives. Their questions lost strength. Their suspicion faded into confusion. Within a week, the inspections ended. Port Holloway returned to its new normal, slightly cautious but stable. Elias closed his stall late one night and looked up at the sky. Stars blinked between clouds and station lights. He thought about how small he was. How strange it felt that anything he did could matter. Sarai stood beside him, following his gaze. Your people do not realize their impact, she said. Elias smiled. We're too busy living. She nodded. And that may be your greatest strength. Far beyond Port Holloway, other systems were beginning to feel the same quiet changes. Human kindness, once dismissed as weakness, was rewriting equations that had ruled the galaxy for centuries, and this was still only the beginning. Port Holloway no longer felt small. Something invisible had stretched its edges. Traders stayed longer. Ships returned instead of passing through. New faces appeared at the soup stall, faces that carried curiosity instead of desperation. Elias noticed how often people said thank you now, not only to him, but to each other. Still, unease lingered under the calm. The Interstellar Commerce Council had left, but their questions had not. Rumors spread quietly. Some said a powerful backer had chosen the colony. Others said Port Holloway was part of a test. No one had proof, only guesses. Elias tried not to think about it. He focused on his routine. Chop vegetables, stir the pot, serve soup, smile. But change has a way of knocking even when you do not invite it. One evening, as the crowd thinned, Saray arrived with a different presence. She looked calm as always, but there was weight in her posture, like someone carrying a decision for too long. "They will come again," she said after her first sip. Elias sighed. "I was hoping you'd say something else. They will not be inspectors this time," she continued. "They will be negotiators." He looked at her. "For what?" "For me," she said. "And for you." Elias set down the ladle. "I didn't sign up for anything." "You did not," Sarai agreed. "That is why you matter." She explained slowly. The changes across the sector were now impossible to ignore. Productivity had increased without exploitation. Conflict had decreased without force. Smaller colonies had become stable without corporate control. Humans were being studied, not as soldiers, not as labor, as a model. "They want to know why it works," Sarai said, "and whether it can be controlled." Elias shook his head. "You can't control people caring." "Some will try," she replied. The next day, official invitations arrived. Not demands, invitations. Elias received one too, a request to attend a private forum as a local representative. He laughed when he read it. Representative of what? Soup? Sarai watched him carefully. "You represent choice." The forum took place in a clean, bright hall near the central docks. Elias had never been inside before. He felt out of place among polished floors and soft lighting. Sarai stood beside him, dressed simply, but with quiet confidence. Others filled the room. Humans, aliens, observers, analysts. People who were used to being heard. When the discussion began, numbers filled the screens. Charts, projections, models. They spoke about systems, about efficiency, about growth. Then someone asked Elias a question. "Why did you give her the soup?" a council analyst asked. Elias blinked. She was cold. The room went quiet. "That is not an economic answer," another voice said. "It wasn't an economic moment," Elias replied. Sarai watched the room change. Confusion spread. Interest followed. Another question came. If resources are limited, how do you decide who receives help? Elias thought for a moment. "We don't decide who deserves help. We decide whether we're the kind of people who help." Silence again. Sarai felt something shift. The discussion continued, but it had changed direction. Less numbers. More questions about trust, community, shared risk. By the end, no agreements were signed, no conclusions reached, but something important had happened. The questions were no longer about control, they were about learning. Later, outside the hall, Elias let out a long breath. "I never want to do that again." Sarai smiled. "You did well." "I just told the truth," he said. "That is why it was powerful," she replied. That night, Sarai made her decision. She had hidden long enough. Subtle influence had limits. If the galaxy was going to change, it needed a clear example, but not a ruler, a partner. The next cycle, announcements spread across multiple systems. A new interstellar foundation was revealed, not owned by governments, not controlled by corporations. Its purpose was simple: support local human-led initiatives that focused on mutual aid, sustainability, and dignity. The funding was vast. The founder was unnamed. Speculation exploded. Elias read about it on a public terminal, stunned. "This can't be you," he said when Sarai arrived that evening. "It is," she replied. "People are going to come after you." "They already have," she said calmly. And after us? Sarai looked around the stall, at the steam, the people nearby, the warmth. Then let them see what they are dealing with. The Foundation did not replace systems. It worked beside them. It did not demand loyalty. It offered support. Human communities responded with enthusiasm and caution. They insisted on oversight, on shared leadership, on local voices. Sarai allowed it all. For the first time in her long life, she did not design the outcome. She trusted it. Port Holloway became a symbol, though Elias hated that word. Visitors came to study it. They found nothing special, just people who helped each other a little more than required. That frustrated analysts. It inspired others. Late one night, Elias and Sarai stood quietly beside the stall after closing. You could have taken credit, Elias said. You could have ruled half the sector. Sarai looked up at the stars. Power that demands obedience is fragile. And this? He asked. This, she said, is resilient. She turned to him. You changed me. Elias laughed softly. I gave you soup. She smiled. Exactly. Far across the galaxy, human kindness was no longer invisible. It was being studied, copied, and respected. And in the center of it all stood a simple truth. The galaxy was only beginning to understand. Humans were not powerful because they conquered. They were powerful because they cared. And the final proof was still to come. Port Holloway no longer appeared on star maps as a minor stop. It was still small, still cold, still imperfect, but ships now listed it as a place of interest, not because of profit, but because of stability. Travelers spoke of it with quiet respect. They said it was a place where people helped each other without being asked, a place where no one was invisible. Elias did not like the attention. He still opened his soup stall every evening. He still stirred the pot himself. He still wore the same worn jacket. But now people recognized him. Some nodded with gratitude. Some tried to praise him openly. Elias gently pushed all of it away. I just make soup, he would say. But the truth had grown larger than him. Across human space, similar kitchens appeared. Not identical, not connected by command, but inspired by the same idea. Warm food, open doors, no questions asked. They were funded quietly, supported carefully, and led locally. Sarai watched it all unfold from her ship, now parked openly above the colony. She no longer hid. Her identity had become known, though she never confirmed it herself. Analysts named her a billionaire. Economists called her a stabilizer. Some accused her of manipulating markets. She accepted none of the titles. What mattered to her was something simpler. The systems were holding. One evening, Elias noticed a long line forming before he even opened the stall. Families, workers, travelers. Not desperate faces, just tired ones. He worked steadily, serving bowl after bowl, the air filled with warmth and quiet conversation. A child laughed as steam fogged their vision. An older woman shared bread with a stranger. Sarai stood nearby, watching. You see it now, she said. Elias nodded. It's not about the soup. No, Sarai agreed. Later that night, after the stall closed, they sat together on a low bench near the docks. The port lights reflected on metal floors and distant ships. The universe felt close and far at the same time. They asked me to lead it, Sarai said. Elias looked at her. Lead what? The Foundation, officially, publicly, and I refused. Elias smiled. Thought so. I offered them something else, she continued. A framework, a promise of support, but no single voice at the top. People don't need a ruler, Elias said. They need room. Sarai looked at him with calm respect. You taught me that. Word spread slowly, then faster. The foundation would not be centralized. Each world would adapt it. Human values guided it, but no world was forced to copy another. Some attempts failed, some struggled, but most endured. That surprised the galaxy. A year passed. Port Halloway changed, but not beyond recognition. The buildings were repaired, heating systems improved, rent stabilized. People worked fewer hours and lived more. Elias moved into a slightly larger room. He kept the stall. Sarai stayed. She no longer traveled constantly. She spent time among humans, learning their customs, their humor, their strange habit of finding hope even when logic said there was none. One evening, a young alien traveler approached the stall, shivering slightly. "I do not understand the exchange system here," the traveler said nervously. Elias smiled and reached for a bowl. Sarai watched, her eyes warm. Later, as the traveler left, stronger and steadier, Elias looked at Sarai. "See? It spreads." "Yes," she said softly. "And it does not require permission." News networks across systems began to report something unusual. Human colonies had lower unrest, faster recovery from hardship, stronger social bonds. No weapons were credited, no leaders praised. The conclusion unsettled many. Kindness was not a weakness, it was infrastructure. At a final public forum, Sarai spoke once, briefly. "We searched the stars for stability," she said. "We found it in shared warmth." Then she stepped away from the stage and never returned to it. Years later, historians would struggle to explain how such a large change began without conquest or command. Some would trace it to economic models, some to strategic investment. A few would find the truth. On a cold evening, on a forgotten world, a human gave hot soup to a stranger without asking who she was. And the galaxy changed. Elias closed his stall one night and looked up at the stars. He did not think about legacy. He thought about tomorrow's ingredients. Sarai stood beside him. "Do you regret it?" she asked. He shook his head. "Why would I?" She smiled, a real smile this time. "Then neither do I." The universe continued, vast and complex, but somewhere within it, warmth had found a way to travel faster than fear. And that made all the difference.